our next guest coming into the studio. Welcome to the show, Logan.
What's up, guys?
We wanted to bring on the foremost geopolitical expert, tariff expert, and
you
military.
couldn't get that person, so you got a VC, which is the next best thing, I guess.
No, honestly, what we've seen is growth stage VCs tend to be, have the strongest opinions, most strongly held. So,
Listen, I am open to. I would love nothing more than to be wrong about all of this stuff. And I spent my weekend glued to my phone more than I should, both out of Schadenfreude and also debating Keith Raboy back and forth. Which has he already come on? Is he already poisoned?
No, he's coming on in 30 minutes. Maybe you just stay on and start arguing with
We're actually doing a podcast tomorrow. He and I are. I'm going to try to be a neutral moderator in that discussion rather than a participant. But it was interesting. It was interesting to hear his perspective about what the intended results are of this, because I guess I typically try to stay out of like politics for the most part, but I don't know, this feels a little bit adjacent in that it's pretty economically driven and does tend to impact the world that I play in. So I ended up dipping my toe into it far more than I wanted to.
Well, let's start how conversations have gone with portfolio company CEOs. You guys are obviously been a growth stage software investment firm, but I'm curious, in talking with CEOs over the weekend, what's been your sort of high level, what's been top of mind, aside from just kind of battening down the hatches, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly that. I will say it sort of feels like we've been through three different existential, potentially risky circumstances over the last, 5 years. We had the March COVID stuff, and then we had the unwind that sort of happened post ZERP, the time to get fit or whatever it is. And now we have this. And so it feels like most of our CEOs are kind of old hat in some ways at how to deal with this stuff. And I do think that we measure our time in months and years and not, days and hours, if you will. And so I think it's kind of a wait and see approach, in particular, because it's hard to know, is this a means to some end that might be orthogonal to the pure economic purpose of it? And I think you're sort of seeing that with what Navarro comes out and says versus what Bessent will say versus what Elon's out tweeting now. It's a little bit hard to know what the strategy is behind this. I do think we probably need to take it literally at this point and assume that this is probably here to stay in some way, shape, or form. But I do think that our company shouldn't be totally moving the dials too much in the near term.
Mm-hmm. What do you think's happening? I mean, you do those fantastic public market reports. It feels like just kind of everything's down, but I would assume that some of the larger SaaS companies that are in the public market should be less affected. But do you think that there will be any sort of like bifurcation or like flight to safety that might happen in the next couple months as people kind of figure out who's actually exposed? Like if you're Nike, it's different than if you're Salesforce, I imagine.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it seems, because we've gone through this twice before, and ultimately the results that were learned out of that in the post-COVID, after March of 2020 and then after 2022, it seemed that everyone kind of learned similar-ish lessons of it, and maybe the wrong ones. Like post-COVID, the right answer was to invest into all these tech companies. And so I do think with the war chest that a lot of the venture firms have right now, I think it's going to take a while before people actually stop dancing. I think everyone's going to convince themselves, at least in the near term, that this is a good buying opportunity. Yeah. And if you look, like I was looking at some of the numbers, I think March was the highest buying that we've seen on record from retail investors. And so it feels like a lot of people have learned similar lessons of like, oh my gosh, well, when a dip happens, that's actually a better buying opportunity than it is a time to be fearful in this. And so my guess is it's probably going to take a couple quarters before anyone starts to capitulate that maybe this is the new normal, particularly given how manic the market has kind of been and the decisioning seems to have been.
Yeah. I remember during the kind of ZERP unwind post SVB crisis, you did a show where you were talking to somebody about just this idea of like dry powder, and everyone was saying, oh, well, like the VCs have so much money, they have to invest. And of course, there were a bunch of funds that like returned capital or sized down their funds. But then most of the funds just kind of ripped pretty quickly and found excuses to move into AI and stuff. And at this point, it feels like if you're an LP in a large fund and you see the market down, you've been trained. So I guess the question is like, do LPs pay more attention to this than GPs, or does this, or is it even a longer cycle for the LPs to actually start making calls and saying like, hey, how are you adapting to this strategy?
Yeah, I think that the GPs in some ways, like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're thinking like, hey, I need to do growth stage investing, then I think a lot of people just operate with, okay, I'm going to invest in the relative quality of the names that I see over the next quarter, 2 quarters, 4 quarters, and try not to be too episodic. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to deliver back to our limited partners, for the most part, isn't some relative adjusted return versus all the other sectors in the economy, right? We're not deciding, should we go buy lumber or should we go buy futures contracts or go buy equities in the public markets? Like we're delivering some sliver of a product. And I think within a lot of LPs, that's also the case where you've seen kind of this, as it's been more institutionalized, you've seen different people become responsible with, oh, I'm not just responsible for the venture book. I'm not just responsible for privates book. I'm actually just responsible for the ventures book. And we're going to allocate 8% or whatever it is to that. And so at a micro level, I think a lot of the LPs are incented almost similar to the GPs. Now, as you go up further and further up the stack to the CIO or someone that oversees some like broader purview of all this stuff, then those people are making relative trade-offs of like, is venture at a 12% level like the right exposure that we want to have going forward? And that's where the denominator effect can really play through. I will say back to everyone kind of learning similar points, though, it does seem like a lot of the LPs have decided, hey, the best time to be in these managers is when things are going down. And so we're going to commit to it. And then there's also this like kind of principal agent problem, I guess. I don't know if that's the perfect term for it, but if you leave a firm, then they don't let you back in the next fund. Like you don't get to cherry pick, okay, I'm going to be a part of this vintage, but not that vintage for the most part with the blue chip names. And so the LPs in some ways are sort of faced with a decision of, do I want to get out of this manager almost in perpetuity, or do I want to stick with it and trust their ability to navigate those waters? And so I think that there's a bunch of different dynamics that sort of play out in all of that. And it's going to take a while for it to roll through, right? Like fund cycles are 2 to 3 to 4 years. And it's only on those time periods that the LPs are really making these decisions. So I think we're a long way from knowing.
Well, yeah, doesn't this just continue to overheat AI in that, you know, especially and other sectors too, when I look at the areas that have gotten the most hype and attention in some of the biggest rounds recently, it's defense, robotics, AI. And like, if I'm a GP or I'm an LP, those are 3 areas that I actually, you know, the world's becoming less stable. It certainly feels less stable. AI is not getting tariffed, and we need to, you know, this sort of onshoring, reshoring narrative just means that you want to deploy even more dollars there.
Yeah. It feels actually very on theme.
Go ahead.
No, you know, it just feels very on theme, but yeah, what's your take?
I mean, I think so. Although I wonder when we talk about like AI not getting hit or semis not getting hit with tariffs, like it's such a complicated global supply chain that I do worry about the I think, and I've heard anecdotally from some of the big foundation model companies that the different tariffs and the issues that you have to deal with, not just China or Taiwan or South Korea, but also even Mexico. Like there are a bunch of inputs, even if it doesn't feel like they're direct inputs. There's so many complicated pieces of the puzzle from an AI standpoint that that I think it's going to be hard to disassociate the aggregation that is what's being tariffed into AI. And in talking to people over the weekend that are exposed to these large model companies, I think there's a real concern about what this is going to do to those businesses and their ability to access the different things that they ultimately need. And it could be everything from, I don't know, cooling to different server types, and all these different pieces are a part of a big chain. And so I do think there will be a flight to those things in some ways, but I'm hesitant to say that they're not going to be impacted. I actually think, especially the way at least this has been messaged thus far, it feels like there's going to be a lot of different inputs that ultimately cause a bunch of issues, no matter what the end market is, be it defense or be it robotics or be it AI.
Yeah, we were talking about electrical transformers, not the architecture, but very key ingredient in drawing power into these huge data centers. And most of those are made overseas, many of them in China. If there's tariffs on those, it could slow down the rollout of new data centers, although I imagine that's not a huge portion of like the per token cost. But even like Polymarket has the chance of a US recession in 2025 at a 62% chance. If there's a recession, like people could say, you know what, $20 a month GPT or ChatGPT plan, like maybe I downgrade. There could just be like some consumer hesitancy to add a new subscription as people tighten their belts.
I think that's 100% where we're headed on all this. Like I think that at a minimum, some of these things are self-fulfilling in some ways, where if we have the perception of a slowdown, then people are going to stop spending, which will inherently lead to a slowdown. And so it starts to become a little bit self-fulfilling in that regard. And so I've seen stuff. I mean, I realize Polymarket saying 62%. It sounds like, I think Goldman moved their estimates to 45% this morning, or their economists did. And I've seen some people saying we're already in the middle of a recession. I mean, just the amount of uncertainty that this is introduced. I don't know how you do any planning if you're a business right now and you're thinking through, like, should I maybe not Apple or someone that has, like, you know, a gobs and gobs of money to go figure this out, but like a mid-size public industrial company or something. If you're thinking through like whether or not to start rebuilding in the US, which in some ways is a very noble goal, particularly with regard to security. And so I don't mean to be like entirely anti-tariffs, but if you're thinking through that and you're not sure, I mean, we've seen some people start to break ranks on tariffs already, be it Elon or Ted Cruz or, Ackman. There's like a bunch of people in the Trump world that's starting to break ranks. And then Congress does theoretically have the power to revoke some elements of the president's tariff power. And so, I mean, there's murmurs of that, not to mention midterms in the next, whatever it is, 18 months. And so you have all these different things that could throw a wrench into the tariff plan, not to mention maybe this is just a means to some other end as a negotiating tactic. And so I don't know if I think people are going to be stuck in this state of paralysis a little bit of like, what do we actually do right now? And inherently, I think that becomes self-fulfilling in the way that it's going to lead to a recession for us. I hope I'm wrong. Like, I don't want to be right about any of this stuff.
How do you weight posts coming from the handle @Chamath on X? Because, you know, he's clearly one to happily sort of like talk his book. But at the same time, that guy, the CHAMATH.
The guy, the all-in guy.
That guy's a big podcaster. But no, so there's two things happening. One, clearly happy to talk his own book. He's probably super long, Laura Piana, among other things. But he also is like, you know, podcasting with the people, some of the biggest sort of like.
He's an insider.
He's an insider, right? And so it's one of those things. He's coming out. I think it was last night or this morning, talking about the Mar-a-Lago Accords. How do you kind of evaluate? You know, it's a signal. I don't know if it's a good signal or an accurate one, but do you put any weight on anything
There's this great feature I've started to use on Twitter X, and you can actually do it for any account. I forget exactly where you find it in the screen, but it mutes these people from talking, and then you don't see what they have to say.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it existed. And so I will say, I don't know what made me think of that, but I will say that. I think you have to take some of the insights that these folks have because of their access.
Yeah.
You have to take it with probably a grain of salt, but also as a potential angle of dissemination of information, or at least trial balloons going out there. I saw right before I came on, Kimball Musk tweeted something about how terrible tariffs are, and maybe he just woke up today and thought that, or maybe his brother, who he sits on the board of, and I think a lot of his net worth can be attributed to, maybe encouraged him to go say that. And so I think to be dismissive of any of these individuals, I think is probably not particularly smart to do. But
I'll even, if I'm making a joke, I'll say it out loud to John first to be like, what do you think? And if John thinks it's funny, I'll post it. If he says,
exactly.
I don't know.
Which is the exact same thing as, the Kimball Elon thing.
Yeah, the Elon thing is.
And so, I think all of that is to say, I'm not sure there's I think we've sort of seen that what Besant says versus what Navarro says versus what Elon says, there's not any consistency that at a high level is coming out from those different people. All the messages are slightly different. And so I would find all this stuff pretty intriguing, if not necessarily factually accurate. And so I feel like all these things are kind of informing the little inputs into my decision. But I do think it's interesting to see people like Bill Ackman break rank and start to come out and really be negative against these tariffs. I mean, we can joke, and I have certainly on Twitter about him and changing his views and all this stuff, but at least he's owning some of the decisions that he now finds to be wrong. I find the most frustrating thing is a lot of people just morph their view into whatever fits into I mean, Donald Trump specifically, but this is true of people on the left as well, that whatever they say is their talking point, they just follow it in suit. And so I give Ackman credit for breaking rank, and maybe we'll end up seeing Chamath or some of those other guys do the same.
Yeah,
when's the last time?
The Elon thing's interesting because you'd think he'd be a big beneficiary of tariffs because of the cars and the exposure for Tesla. But my question is, I feel like tech VCs shifted so into the Trump camp. I'm not even seeing the big dissenting opinions on tariffs are coming from Tyler Cowen and the economists. And I'm not seeing that from big GPs. And it's have they just completely over rotated? Or do you think that they're just not even thinking about it or not exposed to it? What's driving the lack of...
Well, one thing to note, Tesla sold almost 750,000. They sold just under 700,000 cars in China last year.
Sure.
The
So
trade war is
company.
Very bad.
And I'm sure they source from China very heavily for certain things.
Yeah, and I think they have factories there as well.
They have a gigafactory in Shenzhen.
There's this interesting thing that's played out where I think kind of post the election, it was so uncool to have voted for Kamala Harris to the point that I was at parties kind of being accosted, people asking who I voted for and all these things. And I was and I just found it an unusual swing of the pendulum in that way. And I give the Democrats, there's a lot of blame that Democrats should have on that. The one that there's obviously all the DEI and whatever, all that stuff. But I do think that if you look, Democrats have been very anti-growth and anti-capitalism in a meaningful way. And I think it was just kind of embarrassing in some ways to be extolling the virtues or pushing back too much over the course of the last couple of months, because it was such a resounding election defeat. And there was even the people that I think within at least the parties I know that within technology that voted for Kamala Harris, like they all seemingly held, not all, but a lot of them seemingly held their nose and did it and was like, hey, this is the lesser of the two things. And so now under the tariffs, I feel like people are like warming up their thumbs a little bit, like sort of forgetting what it's like to like push back too much on this. And so I found myself wading in the waters of all of this far more than I expected. What I find most interesting, though, at like a high level, is just how populist a lot of the rhetoric within the Republican Party, or at least Donald Trump, has become. And I mean, you sort of go back and you look at Milton Friedman or Ronald Reagan or like some of these OG conservative icons, and what they had to say about tariffs are just so different than what we're hearing from our president today. And so I guess the question in this is like, does this present, ultimately, if this is going to be the move that the Republican Party makes from a populist standpoint, does this present an opportunity for the Democrats to be a little bit more pro-growth and like, let's grow the pie? And I think it was pretty well timed that Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson wrote that book, Abundance, right? Because there was no such thing really over the last decade as a pro-growth Democrat, I think. And that would be an interesting lane for the party to try to rally behind. I just don't know. Ultimately, these things seem to follow some like charismatic politician in some ways. And so I don't know who that person is. Shapiro seems like someone that could be interesting in that regard. Maybe if we tweet enough, we can get Weinberg to run for some political office. He can take the pro-growth Democratic thing. Maybe that's Aaron Levy's next gambit. He's going to go down as politics. But it feels like that's a mantle that people should really take.
I don't think his hair can get any grayer.
I agree, honestly. And it's still full. That's the thing. I don't know if that's just genetics or hymns or who we credit that fullness of hair. It's definitely gray, but man, it's like a robust set of hair. It almost feels like he's set up to be presidential in that regard.
You take a company public at like what, 29? Like you're gonna go gray.
Which will do it to you. Couldn't you see it though? I mean, he honestly looks like a West Wing, like a Josh Lyman kind of running into Martin Sheen, President Bartlett's office on the West Wing now with that gray hair. I could see it.
Yeah.
What did you think about Toby's leaked memo from this morning, where he very eloquently lays out how he wants his employee? Like to be honest, like one, it's well timed in my point of view, and that you can basically say to your team, we're freezing hiring without saying we're freezing hiring, because now it's like, hey, if you want to actually make an offer,
hire an agent.
Yeah. No, but I'm curious, obviously if it was leaking, wouldn't have been that damaging, but it's cool that he put it out there. I'm curious what your immediate thought was.
Yeah, it's something we've been thinking more and more about, and I've seen my own workflow switch so much more to being AI native in like what I'm doing on a daily basis. I'd be curious your guys' perspective on like prepping for this show. It's just so much easier to get information at your fingertips and get access to, I feel like I learned more this weekend or the last week, like going really deep into the history of tariffs and all this stuff. It would have taken me in the past, like, I don't know, 3 weeks to do what I did over the course of the last 5 days. And so I get the perspective of like, hey, we have to make our company AI native in some ways. I imagine there's a little bit of marketing behind it, like behind every good leaked internal memo. There does seem to be an element of both signaling to the broader market as well as potential new candidates that are coming on board. Like, this is the new normal. This is the way we're going to do things. But I haven't heard anyone else do it. I don't know. You guys might know.
Well, the Klarna took another approach. It wasn't a memo. He just came out, we're not hiring.
And it was like
anyone.
Almost overly aggressive. And everyone was like, we don't really buy it, man. Like, it's too much. And then Jamie Dimon had that leaked like voice call.
Yes.
Where he was like, you got to work really hard. And it was like, okay, this is just a billboard advertisement for your company and your culture, which is cool. But I think the lesson is like, we all need to be leaking more memos.
I think that's right.
Your red point analysis, you shouldn't try and post that. You should be like, it's leaked.
We'll leak it.
We'll leak it. That's what I don't know if you guys ever like Eric Newcomer. Yeah. It's like a bunch of interesting like, oh, here's Founders Fund returns. And I'm like, Like, how did you? Who would have given you these amazing returns?
If you have good news, you got to leak it.
Yeah, the other one that I thought was really masterful PR was Asif and Wiz last year. What was interesting in that Wiz announcement, when they announced that they were going their own and not going to be bought by Google, was like everything that they said was then reported on the media in the media because of the leaked memo, and so they got to really control the narrative of how things went down with Google. So the dark arts of PR, I think, is a pretty clever thing for companies to try to master, both as for morale and hiring and just public perception. The other one I thought was funny, not to just give credit to Wiz, but I don't know if you guys remember this. Like SentinelOne had some company that was agitating to buy them or something, and SentinelOne's like a $6 billion public company. And I think Wiz announced that they were interested in exploring the acquisition of SentinelOne. The SentinelOne CEO is like, fuck off. Like, you're not buying us. What are you talking about? But like, it gets reported in that way. And so I think Toby's really smart in that regard. And I do think we'll see this divergence of fluency of people's ability to use AI. I still get asked questions from people internally or externally from buddies that are like so quickly answered by a prompt into a model. And so I wonder when that behavior shift's going to happen for people in mass. But I think signaling that that's a requisite thing is smart from an employee standpoint.
Speaking of models, did you read AI 2027? And do you think we're just sort of picking up pennies in front of a steamroller right now with all the tariff stuff? Because if AI 2027, either path we go on, the forecast basically means the economy will change by like 100,000% or something like that.
It certainly seems. I mean, man, I really hope. I really hope we get the ubiquitous sort of growth in all of this. Remind me. I just saw it tweeted about. What was the net of AI 2027? What was the takeaway?
Super intelligence by 2027. So extreme compounding growth driven by AI models that can do their own AI research starting at the end of this year. No hiccup in any of the scaling laws. A quick path to 10 terawatt.
It involves basically by 2027, 2028, OpenAI buying every automotive manufacturer and turning them into self-replicating robot production facilities.
I like that.
So
will we still be able to? Will we still have our jobs like doing the screws into the iPhones, like powered?
That will be in America.
Yeah,
that's the main.
Okay, so we can do that. Our jobs might be gone, but that sounds good. I will say this website's super slick.
It is. It's a really cool website. You scroll down and it it updates the probabilities and takes you through all the time. I mean, it's a beautiful feature. People are calling it science fiction, fan fiction, but I like it. It's entertaining.
No, it's a very cool exercise to go through. It to me, sort of the great irony of this whole situation is like right now, nobody can talk about anything other than the tariffs and fixating on like what's the next post on Truth Social. Bull market for Truth Social usage, but then it's possible.
The big winner in tariffs right now is Pete Hegseth, man. We were talking about last week. Signal this, signal that. Is he in? Is he out? And now that is a long since forgotten thing. So if there's anyone that I think deserves credit or is celebrating this, I think it's him.
Last one for me, underrated voice right now online. Anybody breaking through that you think is good signal?
You know who I've sort of appreciated this mix of politics, economy, and all of that stuff. So I've really, Modest Proposal, I think, has always done a good job. I don't know if you guys follow Buko Capital. I always find him super entertaining and some of the stuff he's tweeting out. So those are probably the two biggest ones that I've been enjoying of late. But I've definitely added a lot of econ people to my rotation over the course of the last 10 days or something. So
yeah, good time to be an economist. Bull market and economist posting.
I've always honestly thought that you would be the kind of guy to have like a really big alt account that we all like followed and nobody knew.
You know what's funny is I feel like I tweet too much of my unhinged stuff. At least I did for a while for my normal account. So
well, he does have an alt. He does have an alt, but it's just about basketball.
Yeah, no,
right?
That's right. College football too. I'll sneak in there.
Oh yeah.
I will say I was accused of at different points in time being I don't know, VCs congratulating themselves, or like all these different things, and I'm like I don't know. It feels I tweeted unhinged things from my own account. So.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Anyway. Well, looking forward to your you sort of moderating this debate tomorrow.
If I hang on, will Keith show? Is Keith the next guest?
Yeah, he's the next guest.
Hang out.
You can hop on.
Should we give a preview? Listen, I teased out from him all his stated goals of what he was thinking was going to come from all of this stuff. So I hope you guys, pin him down on all that stuff. I need to make sure I have all my prep work done. He's sort of open sourcing the manual to debate him by by tweeting all his takes. So
the debate that was going on in the timeline was just that he's somehow found a way to make, no matter what happens, proof that it's working, which is kind of genius. I like that a lot.
I don't know if I probably can I share on this screen?
Yeah, you can share.
Here, hang on.
Just whatever you share is live, so don't share a password.
Yeah, I know. I need to make sure I get
Oh, wow, it's the returns from Logan's portfolio. They're fantastic. What a coincidence.
60% IRR for a decade.
It's all these models reaching out to me. It's like, no, I'm married, guys. Take it easy. Let's see. I can't find it. But it was oh gosh, where is this? Give me 1 second here. I'll wait while Keith comes on.
Well,
but it was essentially a meme of like here it is. Let's see, how do I share this?
Hey Keith, how you doing?
There he is.
Great. How are you guys?
You're on with Logan Bartlett too.
Keith, can you see it?
Cool.
Prepping for the next debate tomorrow, right?
Is my thing coming up or no?
Is this prime time and that's the backup? Yeah.
Yeah. This is prime time.
All right, I'll let you go, Keith. Keep open sourcing all the points of your debate. I want to hear all the talking points. Just get them out there in the wild for us.
Good. One day I'll turn you into a DJT voter.
Maybe tomorrow.
You're going to convert him from a member of the Panikin Party, which Trump says is a new party based on weak and stupid people.
That's me. I actually am getting my card and badge tomorrow. It's coming through. So
yeah.
All right,
you might win the economic department, but you'll lose the dunks for sure. There's no chance.
We'll FedEx one to Paul Graham in the UK too.
Okay. Yeah, you can probably buy in bulk at this point, Keith. You just send them around. So, all right, see you guys.
Great, see you, Logan.